Hello students, how are you all? Welcome back to computer science class of grade 11. You all have all installed Python, and last class we also saw how you all saw the difference between interactive mode and script mode practically. We also wrote one small program of Hello World, and you all saw how algebra can be solved through Python in the interactive mode. Today we will talk about some basics of Python. Just like you learn the language, any language, we first learn the basics of the language. Similarly, today we are going to learn the basics of Python. So, uh, before we discuss the Python syntax, okay, we need to know certain things. Like a Python program, which will also be called as a script sometimes, it is a sequence of definitions and commands. These definitions are evaluated while the commands are executed by the Python interpreter. And this is known as a Python shell. Python syntax is a set of rules that define how the user or system should write and interpret a Python program. If you want to write and run your Python program, you have to learn these syntax rules very, very well. The syntax to be discussed constitutes all the basic elements of a Python program, along with the concept of variables and data types that we need to understand. Python programming language data types are inbuilt, but in C++, declaration of variables was required, but in Python it is not required. Memory management is done automatically by Python. Whatever you value, you will assign to variables. The data type of the variable will be the same as the data type of the value. If you're not understanding this right now, don't worry, we will do this in detail in a little while. So you can say Python supports dynamic typing. We will first discuss the basic elements of Python like character set, tokens, expressions, statements, operators, input, output, etc. Just like in any language, we have alphabets. Similarly, in Python also we have a character set. Character set is a set of valid characters recognized by Python. A character set represents any letter, any digit, or any symbol. Python uses the traditional ASCII character set. You all have studied ASCII in the first class, first chapter. The latest version recognizes the Unicode character set. Okay, so traditional one used to read ASCII, but the latest one is Unicode. The ASCII character set is a subset of Unicode character set, and Python supports the following character sets that you can see on the screen. In letters, it supports the capital A to Z as well as small a to Z. In digits, it covers 0 to 9. Special symbols, whichever are available on your keyboard, white spaces, blank spaces, tab, new line, and all the character sets of Unicode. These are all supported by Python. Okay, so these is the character set of Python. Next is input and output. I'm going to pause here. I think we skipped one slide. Okay, the next one is token. What is a token? A token is the smallest element of a Python program. You first saw the character sets, that was the alphabets that make up the language. Next is tokens. Tokens are like all the words or all the parts of the language, the smallest unit, smallest element of Python script that holds any meaning to the interpreter. So there are 5 tokens of Python, that is keyword, identifiers, literals, operators, punctuators, and delimiters. Okay, the first one is keyword. The following, I starting with keywords, these are reserved words of Python. So they have a special meaning for the interpreter, and so they are called keywords. No keyword can be used as an identifier. Some Python keywords I will show you all in a little while. The keyword is basically a word that has special meaning. These are reserved and cannot be used as identifiers. And identifiers are basically names of any variable, whichever variable, whatever name you give, user-defined name, customized name. Okay, so the name of any variable or any constant or a function or a module is called an identifier. You will learn all these things slowly. Basically, identifier is a name that a user gives, whereas a keyword is inbuilt. These are already pre-made and these are reserved and can be not used as identifiers. Next is literals. This is a fixed number. This is a fixed numeric or non-numeric value. It's called a literal. It can be defined as a number, a text, or other data that represents value to be stored in variables. So basically, literals is any number or any text or any other data that represents values that have to be stored in a variable. If you say A equals to 6, 6 is a literal, A is an identifier, and is equal to will be an operator that you will learn in a little while. Okay, so this is literal is any sort of a text or number or any data that is a value that has to be stored in a variable. Okay. Okay, the next one is operator. Now, an operator is basically a symbol or a word that will perform some kind of an operation on the values and it will return the result. Examples of operator can be plus, minus, multiplication, division that we all know. These are these are symbols that will perform some operation and it will return a result. Next is delimiter or a punctuator. Delimiters are the symbols which can be used as separators of values or to enclose some values. Remember, I have already taught you on hashtag last time. Hashtag is a symbol that is used to insert comments. Okay, that means any information that you need to add to a program is done using a hashtag. All right. Just have a look at it. These are some keywords that have been reserved by Python, and these cannot be used as an identifier. Right now, you will have to learn all these, but I would tell you all, don't stress. You will learn them as and when we start learning, and you are not going to need to mug them up. You will understand when you look at them. But still, it's wise to have seen this, or so do one thing, write this down in your notebook. So you will remember this list. This is a list of keywords that cannot be used as an identifier. Always look into the description box of a video. There will always be some links for you all to see. Next was an identifier. An identifier is a name that is used to define a variable or identify a variable or a function or a class or a module. I know that you all don't understand the meaning of function, class, module right now. Let's stick to variable till then. Slowly you will understand what is an identifier and what is all these things. The language is new. You will find the difficulty. Just stay along and understand one line at a time. Okay. Now, there are some rules of an identifier. When I say you can, identifier is a user name given. Basically, when you will program your code, you will make some variable. If you remember math, sometimes there is A, sometimes B, sometimes X, sometimes Y. These were all variables. Sometimes it was ABC. Similarly, when we will write programs, there will be many variables that we give. But these variables, variable names that we give, which are identifiers, these identifiers also have some rules and regulations. Number one, an identifier must start with a letter, either a capital letter or a small letter, or if none of those, then it must be starting with a underscore, which is followed by a zero and some more letters. Basically, either you start the identifier with an underscore, or you start the identifier with a letter, English letter A to Z capital or small. Python does not allow special characters. You cannot put any special characters in the name of an identifier. You cannot write ABC@1 as the name of an identifier, although it starts with the letter A. Python does not allow any special character except underscore in the name of an identifier. Identifier must also not be a keyword of Python. I have already told you all to write down the list of keywords in your notebooks. So a Python cannot be, the Python identifier cannot be a Python keyword. Now you all will know which keywords you should not use while naming your variables in a program. Python is a case-sensitive programming language. Again, this I have shown you all last class. Also, you all have seen when I wrote print with a capital P, my command was not executed. It showed me an error. So Python is case-sensitive programming language. So if you have two keywords, roll number and roll number, one with a capital R and one with a small r, they will be identified as two separate identifiers in Python. Okay. These are some examples of valid identifiers given. I will attach a small worksheet or a slide or a picture in the description box where you will have to identify valid and invalid identifiers. There are also some more naming conventions. Some of these you may not understand right now. Just hear them out. Class names will start with an uppercase letter, and all other identifiers can easily start with a lowercase letter. Starting an identifier with a single leading underscore, you start an identifier with an underscore. It indicates that the identifier is private. Again, you all will not understand this right now. So I would just tell you all to understand it in your mind. You may not be able to see the application still. If you start the identifier with two underscores, that means it's a strong private identifier. And if the identifier also ends with two trailing underscore, the identifier is a language defined special name. You can skip this slide if you have not understood anything. It's absolutely fine. We're going to come back to this slide when we do these topics. Next was literal. What are literal? Literals in Python can be defined as number, text, or other data that represent values that had to be stored in the variable. You can see there are some examples given on the screen. So there are many types of literals and they've given you an example of all of it. Example of string literal in Python is, for example, name equals to Johnny. The word Johnny is the string literal. Okay. Age equals to 22. Here the number 22 is the integer literal. Float is a decimal value. So height equals to 6.2. Over here 6.2 will be float literal. Then special literal, we have a special literal in Python which is called as none. Okay. These are some escape sequences. If you use these in Python, it will do what is given on the right hand side. In Python language, when I use 2 backslashes, it will show only 1 backslash. When we apply these, you will understand it. The only one very interesting over here is the one. I'll just point it out. This one, \n, which will take you to a new line. This is the only one you all will use quite a lot. Okay. Next was operators. We will do operators next class because I have to do all the operators with you all. Okay. So we are going to stop at literals. I will put one question in the description box, which will be to identify. I will give you all a list and you all have to identify which is an identifier and which is a keyword out of it. Okay. With this, I end today's class. We didn't do any Python today. Yes, we will not be doing a Python program till you all know the basics of it. So till that, you will have to keep that installed software at a side for a few days. But I wish to make you all start using it very, very soon. So till then, stay home, stay safe, take care, and keep learning.